While the Pac-12 is trying to lock down its media deal, realignment talk has been all abuzz. And today we're going to look at the top 10 non-P5 candidates for the Big 12 expansion if they are unable to poach from the Pac-12. So let's take a look. Welcome to the Jersey Score, the channel where we rate and debate team uniforms and logos, but we also do a lot on realignment. So please be sure to like the video and subscribe and to get more content, and it really helps the channel out a lot. So today, as we said, we are looking at potential non-P5 candidates for Big 12 expansion. If it turns out that they are that the Pac-12 does stick together and that the Big 12 is unable to peel away some teams from the Pac and decide they still want to expand and they start looking elsewhere. Now, in reality, I think what's going to happen is the Pac-12 is going to come out with a deal that's good enough. I doubt it will be as high as what the Big 12 will be making, but I think it'll be close enough, and that still having an easier path staying in the Pac-12, getting to the playoff, than having to go to the Big 12 where there's maybe not as big of names, but it's very deep conference. And so the path there, staying in the Pac, and then they can still have their, more traditional rivalries and such. So I think they'll elect to do that at least for a short time before they, we'll see maybe down the road a few years if the Big Ten does come calling for some of those other schools, which might then trigger another round of realignment. So I don't think that the Big 12 is in any dire need to go, if they can't get Pac-12 schools to start knocking on the door of these non-P5 programs, mostly because I still think that there will be opportunities with the Pac-12 down the road. But also, if those opportunities never come, then you're not out anything, because those group of 5 programs don't have anywhere else to go, so they will also still be there, unless a few of them get taken by the Pac. But I still think that they may possibly be an option down the road. So I wouldn't be too hasty if I were the Big 12, but let's go ahead and review the candidates nonetheless. All right, so here's my top 10, but instead of doing a countdown from 10 to 1, we're going to actually count up from 1 to 10, because I think some of the more obvious candidates are at the top of that list. And so I want to build up to some of these other maybe less talked about potential candidates. So number 1 on the list for best fit and best potential option for the Big 12 outside of the P5 programs is, and this shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, San Diego State. And now San Diego State makes so much sense for so many reasons. I mean, it gets you a footprint into California. They are a well enough known brand, and they certainly have good basketball. We've known that even before this year, and they made it to the Final Four. They always put forward good basketball. Football is a little more dicey, but again, still consistently are able to put together a pretty good team, and often competing for the Mountain West championship. And so I think it's just a solid candidate all around. And I should have led with Brett Yormark. We all know that he wants to get to the Pacific time zone, and it's someone else to pair with BYU. They have a long-standing rivalry, so it just fits for so many reasons. That would be the obvious choice. However, if the Big 12 is unable to pull any Pac-12 schools away, it's likely because they have a deal that's good enough to keep them together, and that deal most likely includes San Diego State. So I just don't see this happening unless they're coming over in a package with maybe the Arizona schools or whatever. But I don't think it would play out in a scenario where you would only get San Diego State and not any of the Pac-12 schools. Number 2 on the list is also not much of a surprise. It's Boise State. And now they have not been discussed a lot in terms of a potential candidate for the Pac-12. There's a lot of reasons why they don't want them. But for the Big 12, I think it makes a lot of sense. And they were viewed as one of the likely, kind of the first runner-up for the Big 12 after the last round of expansion. And talked about is if they decide to expand again, as a likely next candidate. And so again, they're not in the Pacific time zone. Part of Idaho is, but they're still in the West, where you'd be able to schedule them in those later time slots. Obviously, a very big brand name in football, even though they're not kind of the juggernaut they were for a while. They still put forward good football, and I think they still get a lot of attention. And having Boise State come to town for these other against some of these other Big 12 schools, I think would still bring a lot of attention. And they've shown that they can put together some pretty decent basketball as well. So I think it just makes sense for a lot of reasons. Plus, the traveling partner and the rivalry with BYU would be great as a BYU fan to see that continued. So I have Boise State at 2. At number 3, we have Colorado State. Again, not in the Pacific time zone, but still makes sense for a lot of reasons. Again, football not quite as good as the other two. Basketball, they have some decent basketball, but really you're trying to get into Colorado. It's a great travel partner. And in a lot of ways, and I've said this in other videos, I think Colorado State makes more sense than Colorado in terms of athletics. Yes, Colorado's already been in the P5, and so they're probably more set up to in that regard, but they have not done much in ways of athletics. And yes, they have Coach Prime, but he'll probably only be there for a few years. If he doesn't do well, they'll get rid of him. If he does really well, he's probably off to greener pasture. So by the time you ever get Colorado in conference, he's probably gone. Now, is he able to set up a foundation that they're able to build off of going forward? Hopefully, but time will tell. So Colorado State, I think, again, brings you that market and decent enough athletics, another school that you're able to kind of put in those later time slots and bridge that gap between BYU and the rest of the conference. Number 4, we have Memphis. Much like Boise State felt like it was kind of the first runner-up to not getting selected for the Big 12 last time around. Now, they don't do anything in terms of expanding westward, but they do help bridge the gap between the heart of the conference and those easternmost teams. They bring very good basketball, a great basketball brand. Football has been okay. I know there's a lot of knocks against a lot of the administration and whatnot, but I think that they'd be great. They're also in SEC territory, so there's going to be great recruiting, and I just think it's a great brand for the Big 12. So at number 5, we have Tulane, for a lot of the same geographic reasons as I said for Memphis. No, it doesn't help you move westward, but it is SEC territory, a good bridge for the conference, kind of connecting those far out schools, especially UCF, still very close to those Texas schools. Not as good in terms of athletics, very good academically, very good. And they did have a great year in football with a great, super entertaining victory over USC in their bowl game. However, I wouldn't invite a school simply based off of one great year in football, but it does show that there's potential there. And I think that's what you want to see, because once they have more money and more resources that they'll be able to build off of that. And so you definitely want to see that. And in terms of basketball, maybe not as much, but if nothing else, I think they should be considered because of their uniforms. Look at this, both football and basketball. These things are fresh. Some of my favorites in all of college athletics. So that's almost enough to invite them right there. So as I'm recording, I'm realizing that this video is going really long and it's going to have to be split into 2 parts, as I'm sure you can already tell by the title. So I've had to record a new ending, but please be sure to come back for the second half of this video, and be sure to like and subscribe so that way you can get that notification once it is posted, and we will see you next time.